Okay, 5 p.m., let's start the Westfield Redevelopment Commission meeting for September 19th. Thank you, Chris. There are no changes to the agenda, but let's open up first with a quorum call, John.
Okay. Lyndon Haas,
Here.
Bob Beaudry,
Here.
Jill Doyle,
Here.
Doug Holtz,
Here.
Joe Plankus.
Here. Okay, we have a quorum. Thank you, John. First item on the agenda is the approval of the Redevelopment Commission meeting minutes for August 15th. I do have one change that I'd like to make, Marla, and then page 3 on the next to last paragraph. It says Chairman Lawler requested Joe Plankus remove his motion, and Mr. Plankus did. And we should have note that Doug Holtz also removed his second of the motion, if you will. That's the only change I have. Does commission members have anything else they want to add for that, those minutes?
Yes, on the second page, last paragraph, I think it's just a spelling. On the lots that have, it says be platted, I think it should be been platted. Last paragraph, second page.
Would you repeat that again, Linda? Which line in the last
Okay, it's on
paragraph
the
on
second
two?
page, the very last paragraph where it says on the lots that have be platted, I think it should be been platted. It's just a spelling.
Typo correction, basically.
Yep.
Okay.
And then the other thing was you had asked to make a correction on the front page of the document. Let's see, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4. The fifth paragraph on page 3. Isn't this supposed to be the other way around, that we need to change where it read Hamilton County Recorder, that it should be Hamilton County Reporter?
Yeah. it
So
needs to
yeah,
be
I think we
reversed.
just
Yeah.
need to switch that.
I
That's
just
all
read
I
right
have.
past that. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
okay.
you, Linda. That
That's
needs
all
to
I
be
have.
corrected. We need to flip that. Okay, anything else? Okay, if not, I'm open for a motion for approval of the minutes.
Linda Nass, so moved.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Bob Beaudry. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. John, roll call, please.
Joe Plankus,
Aye.
Doug Holtz,
Aye.
Jill Doyle,
Aye.
Bob Beaudry,
Aye.
Lyndon Haas.
Aye.
Okay,
Did you
motion
note
passes.
Mike Steele's here?
Sorry, Linda, what was it?
I don't think he noted Mike Steele was here.
Oh, Mike Steele does not have a vote.
I know, but don't we usually say he's here?
Recognize him?
Mike Steele is here.
Mike Steele is here, yes.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, approval of claims is the next item on the agenda. Any comments or questions on the claims? Okay, if not, open for a motion for approval of
Oh, wait a
payment of
minute,
claims.
I had a couple questions. Just trying to find the document here. Okay, so I had sent in an email asking, what do we do when we're over the amount of the TIF services? Because we even were, when we made the last approvals, we're over on 2 of these different TIF services.
Yeah, and that's good news, actually. We've got a lot of activity in the TIFs. Basically, what we did is we put together an estimate about this time last year for budgeting purposes. We have the cash, and so what we would do, if you approve these invoices, we would pay them out of cash. We are making adjustments for the '23 budget, given what we've spent this year.
So you're saying paying them out of cash, out of TIF funds?
Yes, out of the TIF funds. That's
Okay.
All of our expenses come out of TIF funds. Linda.
Right, but we're still kind of seeing them in this approval, that they're still going against the ones that don't have enough funds in there, but you're saying we can just run it into showing an over expenditure?
Yes. And then we basically pay that out of the cash revenues, cash that we have on hand for that particular TIF area. And then I'm making adjustments for next year, adding additional funds for those areas.
So did you just say that if we approve this, we've all automatically approved to pay it out of the cash? Or we're going to make a separate vote to say?
No, that, in the past, that's what we've done, yes.
Okay, and then you're adjusting the budget for next year to where hopefully we will spend no more?
I mean, at this
Well-
time of year, Linda, we have no idea what kind of
Yeah,
activity we're going to have in the various TIFs.
To
So
answer
we
the
did Make the
question,
best estimate possible.
Yeah, well, we
to
have
answer the
4
question,
more.
yes, we would make the adjustments,
more months of
expecting
this.
not to overspend it. But as I said, when we've got a lot of activity, which is good, it happens.
It's going to happen.
And that's the reason for the reserve,
Okay, and then,
among others.
okay. And last month, it was said that we're paying the Osborne Trails out of the Eagletown TIF, because that's the closest TIF that has funds, but isn't Grand Junction TIF actually closer? Does that really,
It's the one I've selected. They both abut up to the project. And so that's where we're taking the funds right now. Yes,
is out of the Eagletown? Because it does have funds in it.
yes.
Okay, so it doesn't really relate to where it's located, that, okay. And I noticed in these reports that Jim was giving us with the billings that we got. Are we going to see, and I sent this in an email and I didn't get an answer on this, are we gonna see the pay 2023 TIF neutralization forms?
They're included in your packet.
Okay, and where is that?
I think they're towards the end.
Oh, it's at the back. I'm sorry. So this answered my email. Okay.
Okay.
I am, Joel,
set.
trying to send emails with questions. I just don't get answers by email, so I didn't realize this was in here, and so
Budget is #1 priority for everybody right now. So
Oh.
timeliness might be a little slow.
I know it is.
That's the way it works.
And then the comment that Jim made here saying that he was reviewing the pay 2023, review and update TIF estimates 2021 to 23 cash flows and updated budget estimates, discussions related to RDC revenue losses from potential tax rate declines. Or is he going to report anything to us about that to consider, or what does that mean?
At this point, we're still looking at those numbers. Basically, we have a declining tax rate that with an increasing AV. So we're doing those calculations right now. If there is something for you to consider, yes, we will definitely bring it in front of you.
Okay, but you did mention the increase in the AV is probably going to cover the tax rate decline. Is what you're, part of what you're reviewing, is that correct?
It's what we're reviewing, thank you, yes.
Okay,
Okay, I have a motion for approval of claims.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, I'll second a motion. Motion by Jill, second by Joe Plankus. All in favor of approval of claims, please signify by saying aye. John, roll call, please.
Joe Plankus,
Aye.
Doug Holtz,
Aye.
Jill Doyle,
Aye.
Bob Beaudry,
Aye.
Linda Nuss.
I, with the understanding of going over those last year projection budget numbers.
Okay, next item on the agenda is RDC Resolution 12-2022, Council Repayment Resolution. Cam, you want to give us a brief introduction here, please?
Certainly. I think as many of you may know, the council recently adopted a resolution regarding repayment of the $6 million loan from infrastructure funds in the past. And so this resolution intentionally mirrors that in terms of the payment schedule and the source for repayment of that amount to that fund internally. And I think if Jeremy were here, he would say that intentionally he tasked me with drafting a resolution that would mirror the council so that this would be the RDC side of that equation.
Okay, thank you, Cam. Any questions on this resolution?
Yes, I have a question. Since the first payment is due January 15th, 2023, and we won't have a normal meeting till after that date, will it be in December that we have to approve that payment?
No, this resolution approves them both in advance.
That's my question.
So it's all 6 million.
I was going to finish it, but,
6 million is covered with this one resolution.
Yes.
so this says we won't have to, yeah.
This includes the schedule for that purpose, so there
Thank
wouldn't be
you
a
very
separate
much.
authorization. I think you would see potentially a voucher for that or a claim for that in February, but this would be the authorization for that expenditure, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? If not, I make a motion to approve the Resolution 12-2022. Do I have a second?
Linda Nass, I so move.
Okay, thank you, Linda. Motion and second. John, take roll.
Linda Nass,
Aye.
Bob Beaudry,
Aye.
Jill Doyle,
Aye.
Doug Holtz.
Aye.
Oh, hey Doug,
Yes.
we didn't get to see your face. There you go. Let's try again.
Smile.
Okay. Aye.
Thank you. Joe Plankus.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, everybody. Turf replacement contract. Matt Trinian.
Good evening.
Matt.
On Friday, I sent over an agreement that is for turf replacement of turf fields F2 through F5 on our field sports side of the campus. As many of you know, we're wrapping up our 9th year of operating the campus. Dating back to when the turf was originally installed, we had an 8 to 10 year life cycle for that turf. As our team has been evaluating the wear on those fields, we've found that it's getting ready to be time to replace. Annually, we have a meeting with the Moats Group, who were the original installers of our turf, dating back to when it was originally installed. And throughout our conversation, we found that we might be able to have a significant savings if we were to move fairly quickly on a turf reinstallment plan or replacement plan. During our most recent meeting this past August, they basically explained that we could have up to over $100,000 in savings if we were to move quickly and install this starting this December. In doing that, I worked with my team to diligently review the schedule of activity, noting that we did not have any activity to take place on those turf fields, those 4 turf fields, from December 5th through February 25th. So during that time, in working with Moats, they felt like they could perform these duties and replace all 4 turf fields within that time frame. So I wanted to note that we were able to, in the agreement that you guys saw, able to save $100,000 in performing that work at this time. We have no loss of revenues, as the fields would traditionally not be used at that time. If we were to look at another time throughout the year, we would potentially displace play. And I also just wanted to make sure that I highlighted that with Moats being the group that we've worked with for the last 9 years, we felt like it was imperative to continue that relationship given what we have done with them. Continually with the 10 turf surfaces that we have on the field sports side and inside the event center, we've had a great relationship to where if we had any issues, we could troubleshoot. They have come out multiple times to train our staff as to how to do small repairs to keep that in-house and to keep us playing at a high level. A few other things just to mention about Moats, just to educate the group, is they have several notable clients that they work with, both on the NFL ranks, the Major League Baseball ranks, several colleges and high schools. Talked to our main contact with Moats today, and they've done over 100 fields in Indiana alone over the last 2 to 3 years. So I wanted to make sure I pointed that out. One other thing that I did want to mention is that we were able to secure this pricing model from Moats by using the cooperative pricing model, using AEPA, which is the Association of Educational Purchasing Agencies. This is a vetted process that allows us to get a price that is competitive with other RFP bids if we were to RFP this, but caps Moats at a ceiling price for the project at a square foot value. And again, there's a compliance check that goes along with their ability to secure or produce that funding, that pricing model for local government agencies. Again, AEPA, Association of Educational Purchasing Agencies. And as I mentioned, about 100 fields over the last 2 to 3 years that Moats has done in Indiana alone, and about 90% of those fields were purchased using this model. 2 other things that I wanted to point out, just in the contract alone, Section 6.1, there's some language regarding price increases for products if there were supply chain issues. In bringing that up to my contact with Moats, that is not a clause that they have ever enforced. That was something that their legal team had advised them to include when we were going through COVID. And one other thing to kind of make clear on that, given that we'd be looking for an approval today for this agreement, they would be looking to purchase the turf and all products by October 1st. So we're looking at a really tight time frame as far as when they would look to change or order and procure those materials. Therefore, we don't anticipate any price increases. So what you see should be true, and I don't anticipate there being any changes there. With that, I'll be happy to take any questions that you guys may have. I again, wanted to try and get this to you guys as early as I could, and unfortunately Friday afternoon was the earliest that I could get to you. But I do want to stress the importance of the timeline given the ability to procure the material and install ahead of the 2023 turf season.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Questions for Matt?
Yes.
Yeah, Joe, this is Doug Holtz. I have a couple of questions, if I could.
Sure.
Okay. Matthew, I appreciate all the work you've gone through, especially by saving us $100,000 and also being able to facilitate the repairs or the replacement of the turf during the downtime, especially, November, December, January, and so forth. But I have two questions in regard to the contract, and they're not necessarily specific to this individual contract, but they're in regard to contracts that we have with Grand Park. The first one, and I'll use this contract as a reference, Section 2.1.4 talks about employee safety and subcontractor safety, which is a common provision in any contract with a vendor, to comply with OSHA, state, federal laws, and so forth. When I was involved with contracts with entities where children were present, and there are tons of children at Grand Park, there was also a requirement, and this is where I'm seeking some legal thought. Since we are dealing with minors, many of the contracts that I saw had a provision in there where it was not uncommon to have a requirement that criminal background checks be conducted on all vendor employees and all subcontractors to include a check of the sexual offender registry. And I'm not seeing any reference to that. And I'm wondering if in future contracts, we should not consider that.
Yeah, I would lean on Cam and our legal advisement as to how we would want to approach that with this specific agreement, but I definitely could understand why that would be something that would come to your forethought, Doug.
Yeah, I don't think anything's going to happen in January. I really don't, outside. But I'm just looking at, especially if they get into the buildings, and I would like to see that. I'd like to see some consideration being given to that in future contracts.
Okay.
The second thing was on section 9.2 insurance. And this is an area that I thought we had already discussed in years past. We have an insurance requirement of the subcontractor. We have no provisions requiring any AM Best rating. And typically you require an AM Best A and a Class 5 showing their financial strength. So what you're allowing by this contract, this subcontractor could have some offshore surplus lines carrier with very minimal financial backing, and you're accepting their insurance, and you have no qualifiers as to the insurance company that you're asking for. That's something that should be in every contract. I've seen it in past contracts, but it's lacking in this contract. The other thing that's lacking is that you're asking for, I believe, 1 million occurrence and 2 million aggregate, which is very low. Past contracts that we've reviewed also had umbrella coverage requirements, anywhere from $5 to $10 million. Now, granted that the replacement of turf on a soccer field is not the most hazardous thing in the world, but your limits are very low. And I would think as a standard for any contract with Grand Park, we have a little bit higher requirements than that to include an AM best rating and also higher limits or to include an umbrella. So those are two thoughts. I would not use this to hold up this contract, but I think in future contracts, I'd like to see some changes made.
Thank you, Doug. This is Cam, and I would speak
Yeah.
to a couple of those points and note sort of preliminarily that I got this when you did. I've done a preliminary review. I think what the commission would be considering this evening is approval subject to legal review. As I've reviewed, I have a list of things that I will have comments on. Insurance is definitely one of those. I think including background checks is never a bad idea, given the nature of the business of Grand Park, certainly. And then I note that it doesn't include a couple of state-required terms such as non-discrimination and E-Verify participation. So there are a handful of things that I've already kind of flagged and have notes on. So I think this would be subject to those comments before executed and put into place, recognizing the need for efficiency, if you will, relative to getting the turf ordered and installed in the off-season, certainly.
I agree 100%. Thank you very much.
Okay, anything else?
I had a question, and maybe Cam can answer this. The agreement is by and between the construction services and the city of Westfield City. Is that how this should be correctly listed?
No.
Okay, I thought maybe you were gonna bring that up in your 5.
What's that?
I thought you were gonna maybe list your 5 things that you had written down. So what?
No, that was not an inclusive list. No. No.
All right, so
I think
how
the
do-
party, choice of laws, dispute resolution, I have a
Okay.
handful of things, yeah.
So this needs to be
It should-
changed.
It should be changed.
All right, and what are you gonna change it to?
It should be Westfield Redevelopment Commission.
Okay, thank you, because that's in there a few times. Okay, and when we get to, I guess we don't need to talk about the timeline if we sell, because this is happening fairly quickly, by next February.
Yeah, the
Just-
plan would be to start construction December 5th, conclude construction by
February.
February 23rd.
Okay, and we don't think that weather is an issue when they're doing this?
Yeah, definitely a consideration. As they built out their timeline, that is something that they built into it.
They did,
They
okay.
did, they did.
All right, because we're
And
talking
they
about a
are,
lot of
they are
snow.
able, yeah, they're able to do a lot of this work during cooler months. In fact, when our turf was originally installed, it was installed in the cooler months.
Okay,
But replacement, less concern from the contractor, given that they're not actually digging, they're just replacing.
okay. And then when it comes to, let's see, on page 8, we're talking about the payments to the contractor, 50% on January 2nd. Are we not going to have to approve that because we're approving this document, Cam? Or because we'd have to approve it in December?
Correct. No, you would be approving the amount that's in this contract as part of the approval of the contract.
Okay.
Paid on that schedule.
Okay, thank you. And the third payment is 10% due upon substantial completion. Why would it say substantial? And who's going to look this over to say, yep, A-okay, it's good? Who
Yeah,
does
so-
that for
so-
this kind of work?
A part of the last week of the construction process is the checklist, the punch list items. At that point, my team will be reviewing with them to ensure that it fits the needs of the campus. At that point, we would move forward with this process.
Okay, so someone in your
Yes.
group will have the ability to do that. Okay, let's see. I think that was it. Change orders, you know, those can always get costly. Do you normally have change orders on this?
I don't anticipate
think?
any with this project, given that we've already worked through a lot of the items that I would have planned for, such as, you know, permanent lines for an 11v11 soccer play.
Okay.
And again, given the tight timeline, I do not anticipate any change orders, especially since they're just going within the perimeter of what we already have laid.
Okay, and then on the signature page, then Cam, would it just be our president who has to sign this? The document when it's changed to RDC?
Yeah, or Matt as the director of Grand Park with your authorization.
Or even Jeremy as executive director
Jeremy is
of
executive director.
RDC?
Yeah,
Okay,
I think
all
all
right.
of those work. I would also note as to change orders, that's something I'll be taking a closer look at. But if there were any material change to timeline or amount,
Yes.
that would have to come back to you,
Yes.
which tends to be, and you can tell the Moats Group I said this, tends to be leverage in terms of avoiding change orders because
Right.
it adds stuff.
Incentive not
I
to.
think it sometimes helps Matt or somebody in Matt's position to be able to say, well, if you need a change order, I'm going to have to take it back to the commission. Sometimes that makes the change orders go away, which is good.
Yeah, okay. And then the payment will be cash out of the funds that you're putting in the 2023 budget that we're going to see later?
That's correct. So everyone knows that at this point, we've worked, Grand Park has worked to accrue a large cash balance, and I'll get into a little bit of that here in a little bit, but the plan would be to pay out of that cash balance for these capital replacement.
Okay. I think that was everything. Appreciate Doug's questions too, because I had, yep.
Okay, anything else, Linda?
No, thank you.
Okay, Bob, anything? No? Jill? Mike? Okay, open for motion for approval of the turf replacement contract.
So move.
Okay, Jill, so moved.
I'll second. You want to take it and I'll second?
Okay.
Okay. Motion by Bob, second by Jill. John, please take roll.
Joe Plankus,
Aye.
Doug Holtz,
Aye.
there you go. Jill Doyle, thank you.
Aye.
Bob Beaudry,
Aye.
Linda Noss.
Aye. And can we see a copy, Cam, when you complete it?
Certainly.
We will, right? Okay.
Very
Thank you
good.
all.
Thank you. Motion passes. Thank you, Matt. You're up for another one to cover ratification of park user agreements. Can't get away that easy,
Got
man.
to pull up my lawn chair for this one. No, so for the ratification of current Grand Park use agreements, I did send these out a few weeks back. Just wanted to note that I did not receive any questions, but the bulk of them were just our standard use agreements.
Right.
If there are any questions, I'd be happy to take any.
Okay. If no questions, I'm open for a motion for approval of the Grand Park user agreements.
Linda Nass, I will move. We ratify the current Grand Park user agreements, 28 agreements, 371 pages.
Okay, motion or second? I'll second the motion. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. John, roll please.
Linda Noss,
Aye.
Bob Beaudry,
Aye.
Jill Doyle,
Aye.
Doug Holtz,
Aye.
Joe Plankus.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much. Okay, next item on the agenda, if you can make a quick introduction for us. We had talked about this at the last meeting, but Cam, if you would just cover the RDC Resolution 11-2022 Osborne Trails Declaratory Resolution.
Yes, we'll do. It should be familiar. I think we discussed this last time. Jeremy presented to you all about the nature of this resolution. This would initiate the process for approval and designation of a new economic development area with 2 allocation areas, one for age-restricted housing, one for commercial development in the future. And I believe the strategy that Jeremy laid out in the prior meeting was to be able to finance improvements to infrastructure in that area to serve traffic to and from the development and around 191st Street. So as you'll recall, the process that we've been through a few times now involves a declaratory resolution, which as well as a plan commission order declaring the declaratory resolution to be consistent with the comprehensive plan for the area, council resolution approval, tax impact statement to overlapping units, a public hearing, and a confirmatory resolution here with the Redevelopment Commission. So this would just be step 1.
Step 1 of several. Okay. Any questions from commission members on this resolution?
I had some questions.
I have a couple too.
Okay.
Go ahead, Linda.
Well, at the last meeting, I had several questions. And we were going to meet, and I had a meeting set up with Jeremy, and he canceled it like a half hour before. So we haven't had that meeting since. And, you know, there were several things that I was concerned with, and also the fact that the South Allocation area was talking about having all these homes, but I do not believe there's any homes in the South Allocation area. I believe, and tell me if I'm wrong, isn't this exactly the document we saw at the last meeting with no changes? I saw no changes.
That I don't know. This was, I know that we circulated the most current version after the meeting, and I don't recall off the top of my head whether that was the same as what we talked about in the meeting. I'd been working with Jim Treat and with Jeremy and with John to get it all situated prior to presentation. So I think this is the most current version. Whether it is the same that was distributed prior to last meeting, I don't know as I sit here.
Well, I don't see any of the changes that I brought up at the last meeting in it. I know I didn't have that meeting, but yeah, I didn't think it was acceptable then. I'm concerned with, some other considerations on this is that it's on residential, and with the changes that are going on in the country with residential and interest rates and, dropping over 18% in residential starts, do we still feel confident that this would bring forward this TIF? Because if we get into an allocation area and then we get into a TIF and the market falls down, then we're paying it out of some other tax source, which is usually lit. I know we're not quite there, but it's all a part of the process.
Yeah, and I would say in terms of just differentiating between this process
Yeah,
to
I get
approve the
it.
designation and the process that would be separate and apart for approval of any bonds to be issued backed by this TIF, that would be a whole other set of approvals, which would
Right.
be supported by various financial projections and other information that Jim Treat would put together. So this is really just the baseline of creating the district. The performance of the district would then be evaluated relative to any bonds in the future. And if there were a slowdown in activity such that it could not support those, then that would inform whether or not to proceed with the issuance of bonds. So I just wanted to make a legal distinction between what this does
Yeah.
and any future financing.
I get that. And then talking to Jeremy, after our last meeting and before we were going to have a meeting, but we didn't have a meeting, what he did tell me in speaking with him after that meeting was that although this was saying $20 to $25 million, he expected it was easily going to be $40 million. And that's a big difference, and I don't see anything changed in here about that. I don't see any more clarification of what the project is. Like I mentioned at the last meeting, it's pretty broad. There's quite a few things in here, and I know Jeremy had talked a little bit, even to the council in talking about, and the finance committee on projects that, maybe dividing things out, but I don't think that's very clear in this document. So we kind of get in it with it's pretty broad with kind of, hey, whatever. And I don't know if it's up to 25 million, or then we're going to have to find more money.
Yep. Well, I will speak to the breadth. It's intentional because
so.
this is, and it's intentionally broad because that arms the city and the Redevelopment Commission with the maximum amount of consideration for future use, which would again be a separate approval. The numbers, the $20 to $25 million comes, and I recall this from the drafting process, comes from projections from O.W. Crone, from Jim Treat about what could be produced here, but that is a separate number from the budget for all the improvements that the Department of Public Works may think are necessary. So I think what that shows, and what I recall from conversations with Jeremy in the last meeting, is this is a potential funding mechanism for some aspects of those improvements that are needed, not necessarily something that could support financing all of those improvements. And I think that's the difference between the two numbers. That's just from my recollection as I drafted it. But again, the breadth of potential projects just gives you all the flexibility. And my goal is always to maximize that, because you get to make that decision in the future.
And it was clear from Jeremy in the meeting presentation last month that in fact, they hadn't designed this. They didn't know much detail on what the project is. And that's a little concerning that we're moving forward without knowing exactly, or closer. I mean, maybe not exact, but it's pretty broad for this range.
Wouldn't I be correct, Cam, in saying that all this is doing right now is setting up the mechanism to make things happen down the road?
Precisely.
But it's
Because
costly.
part of it is residential, part of it is commercial, and obviously there's different rates from the standpoint of AV collection. tax collection.
Yes, and that's that distinction that I want to be sure we're making. All that this process would do, again, this is step one in a lengthy process to designate the TIF, which would allow for that increment to be captured. Any decisions about what it's to be used for, whether it's bonded against, what the projects are to be funded, are future decisions that you all would make. So nothing is cast in stone in this plan, and that's part of the resolution. And so the intent is to be broad so that you have a wider universe of decisions that you can make in the future, depending on how this performs, depending on how those projects get designed and the cost estimates, and all of that would be presented to you in the future for future
At the
decisions.
appropriate time, yeah.
But this page called the Factual Report in Support of Findings for the Osborne Trail South Allocation Area, we even agreed at the last meeting that this isn't an accurate factual findings because it's talking about residential. So. And it didn't get changed. Nothing's been changed.
Okay, Bob, you had some
Yeah.
questions.
Linda asked some of the stuff I was going to ask, but briefly, going over these TIF neutralization worksheets, and I'm just going back with this. So, and I appreciate getting those. There's 14 here that we received. Now, the county recognizes 24 TIFs within Westfield due to maybe overlapping tax allocation areas or rate differences. But according to the county auditor, there's 24. And I have the worksheet at my desk at my office. I meant to bring it and I didn't. My question is, are there 24 TIF neutralization worksheets that are submitted for the 24 TIFs recognized by the county? I would think they would have to be. It looks like we got 14 of them, and I don't know if that's because those are the other ones don't have enough in there that you really thought it was.
These are the active allocation areas that have neutralization calculations done for them.
Okay.
There's no other activity other than what's in these sheets. This is what Jim submits to Robin, and this is what they use, and when they're doing their work. But there are a lot of numbers out there, allocation areas, the 29 dash numbers.
Right.
And they're just only parts of this. And at the end of the day, these are, as you stated, these are the areas that are active and that are being tracked. There's activity.
Okay.
Or something's being built there, whatever. Bob
So if it's a
said.
zero, then there would be no reason.
Yeah, there would be no reason to go through this type of.
The only reason I
exercise.
ask is because, looking on the county's, I guess, worksheet or spreadsheet, it's hard to get an actual depiction. I mean, I was noticing, like when the bonds are due, a lot of them start, I think, in 37, 38. But it's really hard for me to get a true feel for the obligations and what's going to be there down the road. I mean, because it seems like here we are, we create more EDAs and more TIFs, and we don't really know, there's no real plan on how we're going to be able to pay them all back down in the future without continuing to pull money from schools, from public safety and things like that are impacted when we create these TIF areas. And then the schools come back and hit us with referendums. So I guess it doesn't really specifically speak for Osborne Trails, but it's hard for me to actually, analyze this in a financial matter when I really don't really, you follow what I'm saying?
Not really.
I don't think I have
I'm a little
enough
lost.
information. That's why I'm asking for things like your strategic plan, which it was in the minutes from last meeting, saying, what's the strategic plan for the TIF balances we're carrying, so we know, so we don't have to ask, and I still don't know what the plan is. I don't know if there is a plan, other than, well, if we got the money here and if we need it, we can use it, but there's really, so you kind of left twisting in the wind. And I'm a numbers guy, I need to see what's going on. To me, the Osborne Trail area is a residential area 55 and over that's already partially built, and there's great demand, so it's going to get built whether the EDA is created or not, and all that funding is going to flow through the taxing authorities as it should. We create an EDA and TIF with the remaining, and that money is 100% capture. And Jeremy Lawler told me that at the last meeting. I had a discussion with him afterwards, and I'm thinking, well, if we're going to 100% capture that, then that's just, basically, we're taking the creation of assessed value and funneling it through other things, and we're choking off things we continue to choke off, if that makes sense. I'm just trying to make it a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm struggling with the choking off part, but I'm not gonna, I'm gonna focus on.
Because any creation of assessed valuation, once you make this another EDA area, it's gonna all go towards the primary obligation first, am I not correct? Which is the bond.
If we bond.
There's 100%.
If we bond.
So.
I mean, this is the first step.
Yeah, I don't want to get in the weeds on this, but I don't know that, for me, I've actually seen enough to make a determination moving forward whether I'm comfortable even creating another EDA right now, unless there's, already a set plan of things coming in that we know is going to happen.
When you say that, Bob, you mean development that's coming in?
Yeah,
I mean, we set up TIF districts 10 years ago. When we started, after the development of the comp plan, we had 0 TIF districts.
okay,
Now we got 9.
right. No, we got more than that.
I know what you're saying, but I'm going to tell you, we got 9 accounts. Is that correct, John, or 8? The summary.
The summary's 9, yes.
The summary is 9.
Summer's not right.
And on the back of that sheet that shows that layout for that TIF district, it has the funds that are going to be paid out, whether it's bond repayment or whatever it is. So please look at those different accounts, and it has a plan as to where that money is going to go over the next 5 years. It's there. It's on the back of that initial sheet, and John has provided that sheet to all the commission members.
And that plan's ever evolving too, depending on.
Keep in mind, this is for commercial development, and it doesn't add any kids to the school. The 55 and older doesn't add any kids to the school. So
Right,
there's,
but this is residential.
yeah, it's residential, but it's 55 and older, Bob. You can't have anybody under the age of 19 living in that development. That's in the,
Right, well, I understand that.
So, I mean, the school's not losing, the school's not going to generate any expenses because of the 55 and older community.
But they won't realize any revenue either.
Yes, they will. They'll still have the referendum dollars, which they still have to pay.
Well, right, that's
Those
my
residents
perfect
still
point.
have to pay that.
Do we want to continue to always go down the road and have to pay referendums?
Well, I think that's a question.
don't really want
That's
to.
a question for the school district. That's not for us. So, okay.
Mike?
Any other questions for,
Well, there you go. And this is why.
well, that's a whole different topic. Okay, any other questions for Cam
No,
or John?
I just want to say, when you're looking at TIFs, we actually had TIFs in 2006 and 2007, and the Village Park before that, so they
That
didn't.
was a county TIF, and then we got a 50-50
Yeah, I know that one
split
was,
on it.
but the east side was in 2006, then we expanded it with
That's
another
when
one
we-
in
that was when we started, right after.
2007. Yeah,
Well, right about the time of the comp plan.
yeah,
Because
just
we
want to.
saw that we needed to do something.
But it
We had
wasn't
no source
wasn't
to
2008. Anyway,
do
go ahead.
economic development. Okay,
One clarification, I know you mentioned the factual reports, looking at it, the south,
Yes.
Osborne Trail South allocation area is the commercial allocation area within the EDA. It does reference houses specifically in regard to driving demand for additional commercial development. So they are linked geographically, but also in terms of what would cause for future commercial development there. So I don't agree that it's inappropriate to mention the adjacent age-restricted community there. It's clear to me, as worded, that it's focused on future commercial development, and that's all it would capture. So to the extent that there was a question there, I think that's why it's worded that way. We know that there are a large number of new residents that will be nearby. We've got undeveloped commercially zoned property that's adjacent that would likely be in demand due to the increased traffic and presence of residents in the area. So that's the link that we saw, just to clarify how that came together.
good point, Cam. Thank you. Okay. Do I have a motion for approval of Resolution 11-2022? I'll move that we
This is-
approve Resolution 11-2022. Do I have a second?
Second from Doug Holt.
Okay, thank you, Doug. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. John, please take roll.
Joe Plankus,
Aye.
Doug Holtz,
Aye.
Jill Doyle,
Aye.
Bob Beaudry,
No,
Linda Noss.
No.
Okay, motion passes 3-2. Next item on the agenda is memorandum of business and over in Millennium, and Birch is here, and Jim Ake, whoever would like to speak to that. I know you guys had a great presentation to the council last Monday, so please give us an update.
Birch Dalton, and it's medical office building in the Grand Millennium, I believe we're talking about tonight. So,
Yes.
quick update. We signed a contract with them. They're rushing to close before year end. They're intact tomorrow, which we have the library intact tomorrow, and I also have all my infrastructure at Grand Millennium intact tomorrow. So things are moving pretty quickly on these two lots. So the medical office building's going. The library is pretty close to closing. Without offending the attorney in the room, the attorneys involved have found a pot of gold, so they've drug it out a long time. So the library closes, and speak with Mr. Rogers. I was going to come back in October after we close that, but we anticipate a $470,000 pay down on the primary first mortgage, which is part of the RDC standby agreement with the library sale. So after both of the sales close this year, the first mortgage that's out ahead of us would be gone, and every sale thereafter will go to reduce the purchase, standby purchase agreement debt.
Thank you very much, Birch. We
Any
appreciate-
questions,
we
happy to answer them.
appreciate that. I listened to that presentation, and the gal that gave the presentation was obviously very professional and knew her business.
Yeah.
It's exciting, some of the features that they're gonna have in that building are
Yeah, we landed
outstanding.
a gym with the group that's coming in, Nedra Moran, and I'll tell you how we got it, and this is just show you how life is. I coached her grandson in football 12 years ago, and we struck up a great relationship, and we've been friends, but she's developed several of these buildings around the country. So when I heard they were looking for Fishers, Noblesville, Westfield, and Zionsville, it was a good match. And plus being on 31, they really like being on 31.
Great visibility
Yeah.
for their business.
Any
Lot
other
to say for relationships, isn't it, Birch?
Yeah, it does.
Okay,
Got to live long enough to use them, though.
yeah.
Anything
Glad
else?
you did.
Are we good?
Yes, we're good. Any questions for Birch?
All right,
Okay,
thank
thank you
you.
for taking the time, Birch. Appreciate it. Okay, next item, Mr. Matt Trinian again, discussion of sports campus budget for 2023.
Good evening again, Matt Trinian, Grand Park. I did want to come before you guys today to introduce the 2023 budget for Grand Park Sports Campus. In doing so, well, let me take a half step back. I always like doing this. I again, kind of delayed in sending this out Friday. Apologize for the delay, but to date, did not get any questions, but happy to review all of this here today. In doing so, I did want to give just a brief overview of where we were for the Grand Park approved budget for 2022 and the proposed budget for 2023. In doing so, I did want to comment that as of today, the Grand Park current cash balance sits at a little over $7.1 million. And for 2022, the current net income for the Grand Park budget account, 640, has a net income of a little over 1.1 million. With that said, I want to be cognizant of some projects that we've been holding off on until we knew revenues met expectations to be able to pull the trigger on some of those projects. But I do anticipate meeting our original net surplus budget amount for 2022 of that 973 number. So wanted to give that update for 2022. As we work into the 2023 budget, you'll recognize a few changes. One of which is our revenue line does decrease a little bit in working with FSG as we went through this process. There were notes taken as far as to get our revenue lines a little bit closer to our real income values. As we started to recognize some trends, it made sense to drop some of those. Notably, in our revenue line, we did decrease or eliminate completely our GP event revenue line, as we as a campus no longer operate our own events as we once did. We are now completely a rental facility. There was once a plan in place to run our own events, and it did not make sense to do so at this time. So I decided to remove that line in totality. Our expense line, you'll see, did increase a little bit, and I'll get into some of those notable increases here in a second. But without the capital replacement costs of our turf, we'll have a net operating surplus of a little over $500,000 if you were to include the capital replacement. And as it's shown in OpenGov, you'll see a net deficit of $1.4 million, a little over that. So I just wanted to be clear on where we stood. Again, utilizing those cash funds that we've worked to accrue to reinvest back into the facility to keep it growing and keeping up with the pace of today's market. Notably, I did want to mention a few expense lines that I did work to increase. The first of which is our salary and benefit lines. I've asked for 2 new full-time staff members, one of which is a grounds assistant, which will specialize in irrigation. If you listened to my introduction to the council recently, I denoted that person would be needed as we continue to see wear and tear on our irrigation system. Last I heard, it was the largest in the state, and being 11 years in the ground, we're starting to see a lot of those wear and tear items. But with that, in previous years, this was something that was outsourced. Current day, our grounds manager is pulling extra duty to take care of those items. And as I saw it, I see his value is best fit as being the manager, not the irrigation specialist. So I would like to have him have the purview of the whole team as opposed to just irrigation. The other full-time staff member that I'd like to add is another operations assistant full-time. As we continue to increase our level of activity, the demand for hours on campus is continually growing. Notably, just a story here, we've worked to accrue 2 shows back-to-back, to which one show is exiting this upcoming Monday about 5 or 6 o'clock. The next show is loading in at 7 p.m., and we have a 24-hour crew that will be covering the conversion of that space inside the event center. So as we work to optimize the space, I felt like it was important to add that staff member to, again, have the appropriate coverage on the campus. Another line that I wanted to draw your guys' attention to was the increase in the water and sewer line. As I was looking at our budget, it appeared as if we may have overlooked that in the past, potentially with that significantly being overspent in 2022 thus far. So I wanted to make that correction to ensure that we properly budgeted for that line. Also, our services lines, as you guys could imagine, we're continually seeing increased rates for a lot of our service teams that operate on the campus, most notably our custodial crews that take care of both our nightly cleanings as well as some of our event janitorial initiatives. So I've worked to increase that line to cover those costs. The consulting line was increased to make sure that we met the exact dollar-for-dollar amount of the LSG agreement. I think if you go back to 2021 when we were in this process to where we are today, I know there has been a scope increase, which is why we'll be, quote-unquote, overspent in that budget line for 2022, working to correct that to match it identical to the LSG agreement for 2023. And then finally, as you guys know and approved, appreciate you doing so, the increase in the construction line to accommodate the turf project that we are going to undertake this winter. As we continue on, I felt like it was important to share and update our 5-year capital plan. This is a list that you have seen before, but is continually being worked on. A little bit of a different view here with this chart. I did want to showcase the top line is our estimated cash balance at the end of, at the beginning of each year. As you go down, we have a capital account that I'd like to start at about 5.5 million. A projected annual spend you'll see throughout, and then our projected year end based on those expenditures. Within this chart, I did want to showcase that we do want to anticipate, or I anticipate us having a operating profit of about $800,000 annually as a placeholder that we would reinvest back into our capital plan. On some years, that may be significantly higher. On some years, we may be closer to that $800,000 mark. But I did want to denote that the plan would be to take that operating profit and reinvest it back into our capital plan to, again, continue to replace or enhance the facility. And then at the bottom, those are just the notable projects. We have several others on a list that I'd be happy to share with you guys and meet to discuss. But again, it's a working document. As we continue to see market changes to facilities, we want to make sure that we're on the cutting edge of what we can offer our clients and our visitors. So overall, and I failed to mention earlier, but the goal would be to keep a $1.5 million budget line in our operating account as we work through this process. So this is, again, the plan and an introduction to the 2023 budget. I did want to showcase that. Again, I'm happy to meet with you guys on an individual or group basis to dive into the finer details, but felt like it was important to get this in front of you today with the intent of having an approval in the October meeting. With that, I'll be happy to take any questions you guys have at this time.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Questions for Matt? Bob?
How much, on the two positions with salary and benefits, how much of an increase are we talking?
Yeah, so we have a budgeted base salary for the grounds position of $52,000, and then a budgeted base salary of $40,000 for the operations assistant.
40?
Yes, sir.
52 and 40, Bob.
That's just pay, that doesn't include like
That's correct.
perf and things like that?
Yeah, so in total for those two positions, you're looking a little over $176,000 with benefits included.
Okay, and I know I've asked this before, I just can't remember, but since the transition with LSG, what is the staffing comparison between like 2021 and 2022?
So what I want to do is allow William to speak, and he has a presentation prepared.
Okay, yeah.
And he's coming up next, but in totality, the Grand Park staff at the peak of 2022 had 23 employees on hand at just our staff, the Grand Park staff.
Okay.
Again, with the core focus of client services, operations, maintenance, and grounds.
Okay. Any other questions for Matt?
I-
If not, then we will turn it
Excuse
over
me.
to.
Hang on one second.
I had printed out of, I have a printout from OpenGov on August 31st. Have you been in there to change anything?
There was an update as of the end of last week to accumulate the construction update with the turf project.
Oh, okay, I'll go look for
I
that.
wanted to make sure that we were able to update that to match the project cost.
Okay, all right.
Okay, if no other questions, then we're going to turn it over to William and LSG update. Come on down.
Good evening, Commission members. William Knox, Legacy Sports Group. And we wanted to come in today and kind of give a mid-year report. We have continually came to the RDC meetings to give our monthly report on our activity. This will be a little more of a deep dive into kind of the scope that we've been providing. Given some of the questions that's been out lately, I just want to make sure we all were on the same page and understood where we were. So this is the report I actually gave to you guys September of last year. That's why it says September 21. Yeah. So in this room, in this chamber, with this body, we went through the professional services scope of work that my company would do as a result of me transitioning out of the director role. So this is the exact, there we go. Exact same report that outlines the scope of work from business development, sales, sponsorship, sales, activation. We would work on the Grand Park District or the Business of Sports, Grand Park Research and Development Hub. We'd also do all of the event production for the park. All of the other operations, client services, and the remaining scope would stay with the Grand Park staff, as Matt just recently mentioned. This was the suggested timeline. I think we met this timeline to a certain degree. There were a few hiccups along the way, which we'll kind of speak about a little bit, related to the additional scope that was added. And I think that's what's causing some of the confusion related to our current scope. We originally intended not to include marketing and promotion services within our scope. We currently do manage that scope of work for the park as well. And you guys may remember we had our original conversation in September, and I believe it was not until the November timeframe we came back to you and added the additional scope of marketing and marketing and promotions, which at that point in time, the budget had already been approved by this body. So this is kind of a breakdown of where we were. The staff reductions, the 552,000 was all removed. All those staff members were removed from the budget at that time. The equipment that supported those individuals, we reduced the travel and training by 15,000 because we were absorbing that scope on behalf of the park through the business development side. And we also removed the LST agreement and realigned that scope within what we were doing. So the totality of that was 815,000. Our contract initially was scheduled to be 550,000, and that was before we added the scope of marketing and promotion. So this is the marketing and promotion scope and kind of all that goes into that. That number ended up adding an additional $105,000 to the contract, which then gave us a total of $655,800 for the total agreement to cover that scope of work. This is just an example, and this is only for reference for where we were a year ago, not indicating anything that Matt has just talked about with his budget. But this was a worksheet that actually Tammy created for me back when she was here, when I was the director, to go through and evaluate staff. So we would plop in a number at the top, and it would spit out a number at the bottom as to what our carrying costs for that staff would be. So if we were to look to employ, and these are based off of probably 2018, 2019 numbers. So if we were to employ a staff member at a salary of 50,000, our full carrying costs with salary and benefits would be about 75,000. So what Matt just went through and kind of shared with you is very similar to what this looks like. So this is where it made sense for those individuals that were already working for the park, who already had knowledge of what to do day to day, to remove them from the park scope and bring them under the LSG agreement to continue to perform those services at a reduced cost to the city and to the RDC. So this is our staffing chart, and this is kind of how we lay out. Some of the staff are here, which you'll see them in another slide here shortly. But this is the scope and the staff that we've provided to support the Grand Park Services Agreement, which these individuals are dedicated to the park day to day, and then the additional support staff that work in the background to help facilitate certain items as well. So now we're going to look at where we are today. So that's kind of the backstory, how we got to where we were January 1. I know there was a lot of questions around the savings that were supposed to be realized as a result of the transition and the number of staff, which we can talk a little bit. I think Matt and I both will be available to answer any questions once we wrap this up. But this kind of gets us to where we are today in the scope of work we've been able to perform since January 1. So these are just kind of some big numbers, which we'll dig into a little bit, but we've been able to book $2.4 million worth of business. The sponsorship revenue is a big number for us because we did not have anybody day-to-day selling sponsorship at the campus. As you remember, we had our agreement with Superlative Group. They were here with us selling naming rights opportunities and more higher dollar sponsorship. We brought on a staff member to help facilitate some of the day-to-day transactions of the activation as well as sale, and he's been able to do a great job in pulling in some new sponsors, which you'll see here shortly. We also helped in getting a grant awarded to the city in the amount of $15,000 to do some public art, which we'll share a little bit with you about as well. So digging into these numbers a little bit, as we went through this year, we wanted to make sure we realized what was renewed, which was business that was on the books previously that we were in a position to help renew, what was new to the park, and then give you a snapshot of where we are in comparison to the 2022 budget. We're currently, the budget for this year is 3.466, and if you remember several months ago when I presented that budget, we indicated that this was a reach year. We're going to try to stretch to get to where I thought we could go post-pandemic related to our budget numbers. We're at 71.14% of budget, and we've still got, we know about 62,000 that is pending, but probably another 100, at the very minimum, 100, 150 that I know will come on the books as a result of this late booking window for indoor space that we'll capture. So will we hit the 3-4? I'm not 100% sure, but we're going to keep pushing to get as close as we can. On 2023, we've already got contracted 436,000 on the books, and we're kind of working with a few others to kind of get those going. Part of what we've been having active discussions with Matt is, because of the RFP, we were debating whether or not we'd continue booking beyond 23, and we've made the conscious decision to continue the booking process as such until someone tells us not to. We feel it's better served to have business on the books as opposed to not, so we're continuing to book the campus at least at this point through 2025. And this just gives a little deeper dive into some of the sponsorship revenue. Eric has done a really good job of coming on board. We've actually created some new assets. We work with Matt and his team. We now have digital screens on all of the concession stands that we're able to sell advertising on. And we recently just went in and placed advertising placards over all of the urinals and the bathroom stalls in the restroom, which to date, we added those assets probably a week ago, and we've already got 6 inquiries to populate sponsorships on those. So we feel that that'll help generate some additional revenue here for sponsorship as well. These are the brands that have associated with us. I think you've seen many of these before. There are several others that are in the works. I'm sorry, I'm gonna go back. So pending, which that means we've either spoke to them or we've sent them a proposal, $217,000. So if that does come through, we will hit, probably for the very first time ever, at least during my tenure as Grand Park Director, we'll hit our budget number for sponsorship, which is a huge thing in my opinion. Again, these are the brands we've associated with. 2 of these are fairly unique, which we'll kind of figure out what the numbers shake out for them at the end of the year, because in addition to their set costs, they also have a commission that goes back to the park as well. So McAllister's Rentals has, I think I shared this maybe during our last RDC meeting. We have golf carts on site that we rent, and we share that revenue with them, and that will go back to the park, as well as S&H Campground. There's a link on our website, and anytime anybody books on that site, there's a revenue share that comes back to the park also. Social media. So this is kind of the big view picture of our social media posts, shares, follows. I think the big number here is the new followers, about 2,500, which is great. We've been fairly active on our social media channels. I think we could do a little better in this area. It's a little, we are in a position where we share a lot of content that others are producing because we don't technically own our own content. Matt just mentioned the park doesn't run its own event, but we've tried to be very active in sharing that and being very kind of out there related to the social media. This is kind of the back of the house administrative support that we provide, and this is where we have one individual that collects all of the statistical data from the activity that happens at the campus. So we work with the partners over at Bullpen and then all of the renters that come to the park to collect this information. And this next slide is just a look at the spreadsheet that's used to kind of pull it all together. But we have an individual that pulls this all together, and at some point this year, we'll run a lot of these events through our economic impact calculator that's provided by the state to really show the economic value of these events to not only the city of Westfield, but the central Indiana region. These are the staff. Several of them are here with us tonight. So myself and Jesse, as you know, have come over from Grand Park. Jamie and Emily and Hannah all were also staff members that came over from Grand Park on January when we transitioned. Eric recently joined our team. Ebony helps us out with some strategy related to some of the other legacy stuff, but has dabbled in some of the Grand Park stuff. And Lachelle does some of our event work. We also utilize the services of LST to help still flesh out some of our event production scope. We also have the Market Key that has come alongside, and they do a lot of the graphic design and some of the brand manager for the things that we produce for the campus as well. The Market Key will be the company that will produce the fan guide, our annual fan guide as well, which originally was produced in-house through the city graphic design staff. And this is just kind of a high-level view, well, maybe not a high-level view, a detailed view of some of the scope related to each of the items that we kind of account for the park. So this presentation will be provided to you, obviously, and you can kind of go through, but this just kind of outlines some of the things that we do. Again, Matt's staff handles all of the day-to-day operations of the park. Matt himself manages the overall operations of the park, as well as our agreement, and our staffs work together to kind of really continue to push forward with all the work that we have to do. And these are all the agreements that you've ratified and approved over the course of the last few months. So I wanted to show this because each of these agreements takes about 5 or 6 touch points at the very minimum to get to the point where they hit your desk. And Jamie on our team is the one who mainly orchestrates a lot of that work and gets us to a point where she's able to hand this off to Rachel on Matt's team to kind of help with the client services. So all of these agreements listed here are ones that you've ratified and approved, and we're pretty excited to continue to grow this list through the rest of this year. Research and Development Hub. As you can recall, this scope was added but is not accounted for in our fee. We felt very strongly about this opportunity and continue to feel strongly about it and continue to work to push this forward. We still have a few organizations that are a part of this group. We're actively working with city legal, to get a structure or a framework together by which we can contract these groups such that Matt can receive those services but also be protected and not be fearful of them stealing data and all that kind of good stuff. So Cam and Manny are actively working to kind of figure out what that looks like. And once we have that structure in place, I think we'll be able to really launch this opportunity even further than what we've already been able to do. We assisted with coach training camp. So we're in the suites. This was a transition for a lot of different departments. The client services department had new staff and was not really familiar with how the training camp stuff operated. So our team came in and helped supported Matt and his team to manage the mayor's suite. So we were there for all 16 practices, and I think the staff had a blast helping out in the suite during that time. We're working with Matt and the team and Context on the enhancement project that we talked to you guys about probably 8 or 9 months ago. So Context was the firm that we used originally to kind of flesh out Grand Park. They've come alongside of us in this amenity enhancement project to really identify what are the next steps for Grand Park to continue to be relevant in the marketplace, but also generate additional revenue. So these are just some charrettes that they've shared. We will have them come at a future meeting to give their detailed report that will also include pricing related to some of these enhancements to figure out if Matt can incorporate those into the capital plan, if they make sense to do so. So once we get pricing, we'll start to do an analysis from a revenue side, what that means for the park, and if we're in a position to advance some of these over the next few years, that would be a great opportunity if it makes sense. The business of sports, still really high on our radar as well. This kind of goes hand in hand with the Research and Development Hub, but separate. So Grand Park was very fortunate to become the very first complex in the country to be on the Play Easy platform, which is a lead generation platform. Our destinations have been on there for the last few years. They've just now transitioned their model where venues are able to be on the platform directly. So we manage the profile on behalf of Grand Park, and to date, we've received probably 12 leads that we've evaluated for the campus for business opportunities. The 1-0 conference is a new conference that just had its first year here in Indianapolis this past year. Sports HQ, which is an initiative that was developed by the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, has bought an interest in the 1-0 conference. This conference is all about technology for sports entities or the business of sports. we've had conversations with those individuals to place a portion of that conference in the future at the Grand Park Sports Campus. So this is where we're continuing to have those conversations with those other organizations that could support our mission of kind of growing the business of sport here in Westfield. Oops. And I had to dig in my portfolio way back to pull this, but this is the report. This is an excerpt from the report that the original commission provided to the mayor when we were evaluating the complex back in July 24, 2009. So if you read through this, once you get this document, you'll see that a lot of these strategies that were identified there still ring true today. So, you know, you look at number 2 there, complementary health, recreational, technology-related land uses, supporting entertainment, dining, lodging land uses, and other uses which would support and complement the Westfield integration, international sports initiative. So a lot of these things that we kind of envisioned back in those days are coming true today, and it's kind of excited that I was a part of the team that developed this, and now I'm a part of the team that's kind of making them come true today. So it's kind of fulfilling from that standpoint. As I mentioned earlier, we actually worked with Matt and his team and applied for a grant through Indiana Destination Development Corporation for a public art installation. We were the only location within the state of Indiana that were awarded 3 grants. So what we went to them and said, hey, Grand Park is too big just for one piece of art. We need to spread this out throughout the campus. So Emily on our team worked diligently to kind of work through the process with the IEDC on the grant. We've got our first one installed already on D14. That's the top photograph. The others will be installed here soon. I think we have a deadline of October 1 to get those in, and our artist is working very diligently to kind of help meet that deadline. The other will go on C4, and then one will be within the Grand Park Event Center. So this was a really cool project and really has gotten us to think a little more broadly about art in the park. So we had a conversation a few months ago with Hamilton County Tourism, and we're looking to create and develop a public art trail in the park such that we can feature these pieces, our statues that we have in the park that are kind of spread throughout the campus, and also maybe seek some additional funding to put some other pieces of sports-related art on the campus. So that's an exciting project as well. So Matt alluded to the fact that Grand Park no longer operates its own events. As you also may recall, back in September of last year, we talked about a strategy to co-create and brand events. We got through the first quarter of last year, RFP was announced. I was kind of in the mix then. Probably was not a good time for us to collaborate on events. We since have created the Elevate Sports Lab, and this is a separate brand that's underneath the Legacy brand, and have continued to place events at Grand Park. So the 3 focus areas for us are football, ultimate, which is ultimate frisbee, and we're starting to develop our esports strategy as well. To date, this company, has paid to you, the RDC, $56,000 in field rent. And we've welcomed over 8,500 visitors to the campus that otherwise wouldn't have been there. So we're excited to continue to develop and evolve this. If it gets to a point where it makes sense to dovetail this back into the Grand Park operation, we're fully positioned to do that. The original strategy was for us to look at developing and cultivating these together. But at this point in time, it just makes better sense for us to kind of run with this and continue to move it forward. And now, last but not least, we wanted to, you may have noticed that you did not receive your July monthly report. And that was intentional because as a result of our discussion at the June meeting, you had advised us to look at how we were positioning the numbers such that you could do a year-over-year comparison. So we changed the formatting of the report, so I didn't want to just hand it to you without that information. So this is the July report. I think we also have the August report that is complete, and then obviously end of this month we'll do the September report. But now you'll see a comparison of 21 versus 22 when you're looking at these, not only in the graphical, but in the charts as well. So I won't belabor this. You'll be able to spend some time and look at this, and we'll be back next month to answer questions. But we want to make sure you notice that the numbers, the way we're reporting them, you will no longer compare apples to apples from previous reports. These will be a newly formatted report that you'll be able to look at. So I will not go through this full report, but this is very similar to the reports you've seen in the past where we've shared some of the stats about the use, the revenue generated, and all of that kind of good stuff that we'll continue to share as well. So I will pause there and allow any questions for myself or Matt related to the scope of work here, or if you want me to bring him back up, he can answer any questions as well.
Thank you, William. You know, one of the thoughts that crossed my mind, I made a few notes as you were speaking, is I would like to see the idea of the renewed versus the new and have that on a year-by-year basis and then obviously accumulate it and so we can see the actual effect that LSG was able to generate. Also, with the social media, it'd be great, I think, if you work with Chris Profit, because she's got some good data for the city as a whole. And whether there's some overlap in there, I don't know, but as a type of questions or comments that come in, that's something I think that would be maybe worthwhile for you to check with him and see what he's got going on.
Yeah, Matt orchestrated a meeting with us actually last week, and we sat down and chatted around, mostly around the website, but just in general around marketing and promotions as a whole. And there are some tools and some data that the city captures that I think if we got access to, it would help inform. The goal is, and I don't want to make a promise here, but the goal is by the end of the year, we'll produce an economic impact report for this body to show the value of the activity that happens at Grant Park that not only accounts for room nights, but also sales tax generation, a whole host of other things. So I know that there's some data that's collected in other pockets that I think we'll be asking John and Matt for to help inform that report if we can do that.
If I remember correctly, in some of my discussions with Matt, that there is data available through the hotel rental company, if I can call it that, that shows where people come from, and it'd be interesting to see if that is changing. Is it getting more concentrated, like Chicago, for instance, or are we drawing from a bigger base of visitors that come in?
And I won't go into too much detail here, but Bullpen, our partners on the Diamond side, collects information. The city collects information. What we want to do is take both of those data sets and compare them, because I think it'll tell a pretty compelling story around where our visitor comes from, how much they spend, how long they stay, and it could be a pretty
Because
cool
I think
project.
that then automatically that would then drive, okay, where do I put my advertising?
Yes.
In trying to lure additional folks or organizations to schedule their events here at Grant Park.
Definitely.
Okay, thank you, William. Questions for William? Linda, any?
Well, you just kind of answered it when you just said that. I was going to ask how we get all this together, because Matt gives a report, and then you give a report, and then we have to add Bullpen in, so you're going to...
So typically, when we report out quarterly, Bullpen's numbers are inclusive of that. Any economic data that we provide by way of an end-of-year report will also be inclusive of Bullpen's information as well. So it'll be a totality of the park as a whole.
Right. Now, the S&H sponsorship, they don't go through the hotel booking.
They do not.
It's
So
a
this is
separate
separate.
sponsorship you got.
But all Airbnbs and other hotels do go through
Yeah.
bookings.
Oh, excuse me, but this one does not, because you saw it after that.
Bob, any questions for William?
I don't think so, not at this time.
A lot of information here, and obviously he'll send us a digital copy. Jill, anything for William? Thank you. Mike?
Yeah,
Doug
Joe, I
said,
have one question. This
Yes,
is,
go ahead, Doug. You're next.
kind of a general question for William and Matt. Interesting story. There's a very similar operation to Grand Park in Mesa, Arizona. It's called Bell Bank Park. It could be a sister park to Grand Park. It's a little bit younger than Grand Park, but there is an interesting story where they are basically going bankrupt, which is obviously placing pressure on the payment of bonds. Now, one of the projections that they made, they overestimated their annual revenues far, far beyond what we estimate our revenues from Grand Park. But the question that I have for you is, one, are you familiar with this park, 320-acre park in Mesa, Arizona? And then two, this is going to be a great story to follow, because I think that we'll have some lessons that we from what they have done and what they have not done and what they may have overlooked. So I'm wondering if you're familiar with it, and if not, can you get familiar with it so as to maybe help us out in learning some lessons from their foibles and some of the problems that they've encountered?
Yeah, great question. Very familiar with it, and I think I won't say anything publicly here, but I think you'll see some news about that complex in the next few weeks as to kind of how they're going to be transitioning. But yes, great point. Different model than what we have here, but we come up against them many times in our bid efforts. So field sports side of the complex, if it's a large soccer, lacrosse, or other field sport event, oftentimes when we're bidding, they're one of the groups that are bidding against us.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Doug. Any other questions, John or Cam, for William?
Thank you.
Not for me.
Okay, with that, do we have any additional business, John or Cam, for?
Yeah, I do have a question for the commission. I met with Brian Michael, and we're ready to do the overlapping tax unit presentation to the RDC.
Okay,
And I have 3 dates I'd like to put in front of you to see if that works. October 12th, October 13th, and October 14th.
I don't think I personally have any issues with those dates. Jill?
Okay.
Let's scratch the 12th. Okay, Bob?
I'm out the 14th.
No, you're out the 14th?
Okay.
Okay, we're down to the 13th?
We're
Linda?
down to the 13th. Yeah, that's a Thursday.
You're okay for the 13th?
Yeah, I can do the 13th.
Okay,
How
good.
about Doug?
Yep, I'm good.
Okay, so
Thank
it
you
looks
all.
like the 13th.
Thank you.
Make sure we get notice out to everybody in advance, and, you know, obviously, we got to post the meeting too, John.
I've got it all teed up. Brian
Yeah.
and I were trying to narrow it down.
Narrow it down and get
Yep.
it ready to go out.
Will that be here?
Post it.
Will they have,
That is correct.
That is correct, Bob, yeah. Okay, anything else, John, for the good of the order? Cam, anything else?
No, sir.
Okay, I'm open for motion for adjournment.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
John, last year at this time, we had the budget, so what's the schedule for getting that done?
I will be doing the budget at the overlapping tax unit.
Oh, you'll be
So-
presenting the budget?
So I will present the budget that we'll have ready at that point.
Okay,
And then you guys can comment, you can give me your
Input.
comments afterwards or at the next meeting.
for the,
Because we don't have the same deadline as the rest of the municipality, right? So this will allow you to hear the entire presentation, see the budget, and then at the next meeting, we can decide what we want to do.
and it'll be the same update with those TIF maps?
Oh, yeah.
You're
yeah,
still
yeah,
using that
all of that.
Oh, yeah,
updated?
it's,
Okay,
I've got quite the following with those things.
great. And is there something coming up on changes in the garage wrap project as far as the developer agreement and revised funding agreement? Nothing that's coming,
I'm not aware of
Before
anything
us?
coming
I'm
to
not
this
aware of
body
anything.
at
We
this time.
signed, there was a bunch of paperwork signing this morning that we had to do in the Westfield Building Corp. Had to sign off on documentation that had already been approved by the various bodies. So that project is moving along.
okay, but I thought there were some changes that were happening in the funding agreement, the developer agreement. Not aware of anything
Not
on
that
that,
I'm aware of
Cam?
anything, Linda.
No, I'm not aware of anything that is
I think
needing to come back
Catherine
to you.
Finello is very involved in that.
She certainly is, yeah. So we're
We met with
supporting
her
her
this
as
morning,
needed.
Linda, to sign all the paperwork. So there was no indication from her of anything different than what we've already approved through the process.
Yeah, Catherine is the point on that. We're supporting her as needed, and certainly anything that would need to be approved would come back to you. But I think the standing approvals that were already rendered are serving to get the project to closing at this point. That's my understanding.
Everything's on track as far as I know.
Okay, and did we resolve the 640 account? Remember the 640 sports campus account, that there was the question of what type of a fund was it? I think it's still an administrative fund, so are we good on this, or do we still have housekeeping to do?
No, as you'll recall, we submitted our response relative to the institution of the ratification process about contracts and things that are out of that fund that I think satisfies where we are with the State Board of Accounts there. And so I'm not aware of any further action at this time that we need to take.
So we're not gonna get questioned about that again, you don't think? Okay. Just wanted to ask. I had it as an old issue that was rising to the top again, because it'd been a while.
Okay, I would ask the commission.
I got one more question,
I'm sorry
sorry.
about.
In a conversation, I think, that Linda and I had, we were talking about the claims and OW Crone and the work they do. And I was just curious, or we were curious, I guess, when we talked about, I mean, they do a lot of work for the city. Are they under contract, or how is the scope of their work gauged? And how is the rate negotiated? I think that was we talked about that.
I think that was part of the question, knowing that we're going over these TIF services, and I've never seen a contract, and do we think his rate could increase, or next year it could increase? Because I was looking at what you were kind of entering as budget item numbers for next year, and it's considerable increases. So is it that we're so busy, as you said, or is it that there's something changing in the contract or rates or anything like that?
I will I'll go look for the contract. It was
There is a
before-
contract.
That, it was before my time, but I will go look.
Okay.
And I am not aware of any rate change, and I would make this body aware if there was one. So, but I will follow up on both those questions.
And I noticed by reading his, what he sends us as billings, most of the hours are his own. You know, he has different rates for himself and different people in the office, but, and I had asked before, I thought it would be nice if we get more of a report from him on what he's working on, other than just what we read on his billings. Here's what he's doing, but we never really hear a lot of detail about that.
I think from what he's working on, correct me if I'm wrong, John, he's given assignments by city staff on what the priorities are. Obviously, right now, the budget's the priority. And beyond that, as these projects require action of the next step, and there's some financial analysis, that's when he gets involved. Is that a valid way of stating?
I think that's a fair statement. I mean, and most of the work that he performs is the after work, like neutralization, or the pre-work, right? Which we've got to, my term, nobody else's. We've got to fish on the hook. We've got to run it to ground. And he's going to do that preliminary work for us.
Right.
Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
And that's where,
so, yeah.
in my conversation earlier, it's like, because the state goes by allocation number when they identify the TIFs, based on rates, overlapping allocation areas and things like that. So you get the TIF neutralization worksheets, and there's 14 of them, but yet they recognize 24. Then that's what, that's what gets a little bit confusing. to
I
me.
will.
I know you
try to-
consolidate, you
yeah,
do.
I will.
And I understand why.
I have a lot of that consolidated down. What I will try to do is I will try to work it backwards out to those numbers. And I'll try to present that here shortly.
After the budget.
I think I said before, I appreciate getting these TIF allocations, but these were filed in July. I wish we, could see these, because I can't review all this tonight, 14 pages and all these numbers. But thank you for getting this to me, and I think it was in response to my email asking for those.
Yes, but I'm lost with the timing.
Well, these are filed and
Yeah,
these are filed and signed July 18th by Robin Mills.
right.
So,
They're required by the auditor's office by the 1st of August.
yeah, I just would have liked to have seen them, maybe last month or when they came out, if you were just going to give
okay,
us
that kind
copies.
of
And that's
timing.
why I
All
was
right.
emailing you
Okay.
to say.
Okay, I
where
get
are
it.
they? Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, Have a motion on the floor for adjournment.
Second.
Okay, thank you. All in favor, voice vote, signify by saying aye. Aye.
I,
Okay, commission members, please stick around because we got some paperwork to sign.
But I'm hungry.
What's that?